I'm wearing the same shirt again, but this time I'm fighting with the handy-dandy Gunstock War Club. Although, you know what, I should probably put the cover over the blade here. Hold on a second. So, Zodiac Academy 2, Ruthless Fae. It's, bad. I don't know what else you would expect. However, I will say that this is an improvement over book 1.
What the hell did you just say?
It was bad, and don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. It is still bad, but it wasn't, like, painful to get through or anything like that. There are improvements over the first book. There is, you know, a plot. There are events that occur, and these events lead into each other, and then characters try to achieve goals, and they wind up in conflict with other characters who are trying to achieve different goals. And these characters don't just exist as vague tropes for people who are too dumb or too lazy to read subtext. Like, they have personalities. You know, they feel things and they think things, and they have backstories, they have pasts. And those pasts influence their personality and their actions in the present. The fantasy world has some details that do separate it from Earth, unlike the first book. Not a lot of details, you know, that part of the book is an improvement over the first one, but it doesn't feel like there was any effort put in. Because yes, Ruthless Fae is still very bad. I cannot emphasize that enough. It is still awful, and I don't recommend reading it. But unlike book 1, it doesn't feel like the authors weren't trying. Yeah, the book is here just for masturbatory material, but there's an effort. You know, there's effort being put in. They're trying to hide that the book is just there for masturbatory material. Now, it's still ultimately just a bad Harry Potter ripoff. You know, it's just Harry Potter with sex scenes, which, honestly, if you want that, I would just recommend reading through a bunch of Harry Potter fanfiction, because we got more than 25 years worth of that out there on the internet now. You can just go read that if that's what you're looking for. But Zodiac Academy is just a ripoff of Harry Potter. However, now it feels like the authors actually wanted to rip off the stuff that made Harry Potter good. They failed, but it feels like that's what they were trying to do. So, while I don't like this book, I can't bring myself to hate it. You know, I see the effort here, and there are one or two things that I enjoyed. Unironically, the first book took itself way too seriously. This one has stuff in it that's funny. I mean, funny on purpose, intentionally funny stuff in here, not just something so bad I had to laugh at it. Like, there's one scene halfway through, which I will get to and explain later on, but there's one scene about halfway through this book where I laughed at it, and then I realized, hey, that was funny on purpose. And then I stopped and realized, like, yeah, I don't like this book, but it's not a miserable experience either. Like, it's just bad. And I think that summarizes my thoughts on this altogether. Like, it's bad, but it wasn't miserable to get through. So from here on out, there will be spoilers. Once again, I do not recommend you read this. I don't recommend checking out the first one either. But that's, I don't know, I just feel obligated to tell you. Spoilers ahead. Be advised.
Dude, if you were Polish and you jacked off, that would be a Polish pole polishing.
Alright, so a quick refresher for everything important in the first book. There's not a lot there, but just a quick refresher. There are twins named Tori and Darcy, who are the same person. They have no differences in their personality or actions either. Like, they do pretty much all the same stuff throughout the book, so we just get the same events repeated twice. And they find out that they are super special fae, so now that they're 18, they get to go to the Fae realm, which is called Solaria, and they get to go to Zodiac Academy, where they learn to use their magic and stuff, and also they are the inheritors of the previous king of the Fae, so they can, at least in theory, become the rulers of Solaria, and they also inherit a bunch of money. At the magic school, they have sex with hot boys, and there are bullies. And that is everything that happens in the first book. There is no plot in the first one. Now, at the very end of the first book, they find a dead body, so it's implied that, okay, yes, this is going to be important later, like that's the beginning of a new storyline or something. And the murder mystery is barely even brought up in the sequel, which I thought was very funny. But, I mean, hey, the sequel has a plot. It's just not focused on what I assumed it would be focused on last time. The second book, Ruthless Fae, is mostly about Tori Darcy getting revenge on the bullies who wronged them, as well as bad romance as foreplay for bad sex scenes. And I gotta say, the whole revenge plot is handled pretty well. There are a lot of books like this that would have just had them go way overboard in their quest for revenge. You know, like, you hurt the main character, you cut the main character's hair, now I shall murder your entire family, and the book will portray me as being totally in the right. Like, you know, most books of this style would do something like that. However, in this one, Tori Darcy get revenge, but it's within reason. Like, there's one guy that they get back at by getting an inflatable Pegasus sex toy and then putting that in his room while he's in the shower, and then he comes out and he's undressed and he sees it and he tries to get rid of it, but people see. So, like, he's trying to shove it through the door and he's getting mad and people are filming him on their phones, and he goes, "If I find out who does this, I'm going to fuck you up." But then they take the footage and edit it, so he starts going, "I'm going to fuck you, and that's the funny scene I mentioned halfway through the book. Like, when it got to that, I laughed. It actually made me laugh. Like, it was a funny scene. It was written in a funny way. The scenario was ridiculous, but I could see how things got to that point. Like, it was unironically and very sincerely a funny scene. And yeah, that's an appropriate way to get revenge on somebody if they've wronged you. It's not going overboard. It's not so big that I feel myself thinking like, okay, you guys need to pull back, but it's also not so small that it doesn't do anything, and it's not stupid. Well, I mean, okay, it is kind of stupid, but it's stupid in a funny way. Like, yeah, this is how you get revenge on people. And then later, they get revenge on somebody by putting itching powder in his jockstrap. Except it's magic itching powder because world building. These feel like scenes from a comedy movie from the 90s or the early aughts, but in a good way. And that is like the bulk of the actual plot for most of this book. Like, again, there's bad romances and stuff, which I'll get to in a minute, but that is the bulk of the actual plot. Like, the only real subplot in here that isn't involved with their revenge, and even then it's tangentially related, is that at the beginning, Tori Darcy steals some treasure from somebody, and in the treasure is a cursed dagger, which is actually illegal for him to own, but Tori Darcy doesn't know that. So they hide that, and meanwhile he's searching around, desperate to find it. But again, that plays a smaller role in the story than you might think. So it's not really that important. And then, near the end of the book, we find out about a sport called pitball, which has never been brought up, but I guess we're supposed to just care about it now. I assume because the authors remembered, oh yeah, Quidditch, we gotta copy that too. Now, Quidditch was fun because, number one, Harry was naturally talented at it, yes, but he still had to work at it a lot, and it was the first time in his life that he found something that he was really good at, and it was the first time in his life that he was part of a team that was working together to achieve a bigger goal. So that's why that worked so well in those books, whereas Pitball, Tori Darcy, they just kind of watch other people play it, which, alright, like that's fine, I guess, but why am I supposed to care? But this is time for the climax, so now the pitball game is attacked by a bunch of nymphs, because apparently nymphs exist, and every fantasy creature is just a type of fae, except for nymphs. Like, what are they? What do they do? What do they want? Who cares? The nymphs are the bad guys, and they are attacking now, so we have to, like, feel something. So for the climax, there's a very poorly written battle where Tori Darcy do a bunch of cool stuff, despite not really trying or training all that much, just because they're the main characters, and the main characters get to have all the cool powers. And I'm sorry that I keep just calling them Tori Darcy, but they really do blend together. Like, they have the exact same narrative style. They do, again, all the same actions, like, oh, this one's with this hot bad boy, and this one's with this other hot bad boy with the exact same personality. So, like, I couldn't tell you where one stops and the other begins if I tried, and I don't feel like trying. So, in my mind, they are just some sort of horrifying homunculus with two minds that share the same thoughts. And then the book ends, and I guess the Fae are just at war with the nymphs now. I don't know what that means, and I don't know what the stakes for that conflict are, which is not a great way to have a cliffhanger. You know, like in the first book, the cliffhanger of finding a dead body at least, you know, hinted at something interesting happening. You know, you don't need a whole lot of exposition or world building for that to be interesting and for us to know that, oh, this means something big is going on. Whereas if there's going to be a war, you have to explain a lot of stuff beforehand for us to care. So like I said, this book is still bad, but there are things happening. You know, the protagonists are doing things. They aren't just existing and waiting for the plot to happen at them. And I've said before that for some reason that is an especially bad problem with books written by women authors. It's not even like the characters themselves, like whether the protagonists are boys, girls, men, women, doesn't matter. If the author is a woman, you're more likely to run into the passive protagonist problem. So it's actually kind of nice to see this one buck the trend a little bit. And it's still not a complicated story. It's not good, but it exists, and simply by existing, by having a plot at all, it is better than book one. Beyond that are the romances, which are not good. However, like I'm going to keep saying this over and over again, there's effort here. You know, there is an attempt to add, you know, conflict to the romances. Conflict, you know, like the core of storytelling, the central pillar upon which everything else stands. Conflict, you know, like there's an attempt to add some of that here. Like the Tory Darcy homunculus. That's gross to even think about, but one of the Tory Darcys, they had sex with their vampire fae teacher in book one. Because if you don't remember, all fantasy creatures are just different types of fae, so vampires are also just a type of fae. And one of their teachers is a vampire fae, and one of them had sex with him. However, she is 18 years old, at least, so, you know, it's not statutory rape, it's just inappropriate and unprofessional. And in my book one video, I think I did mention that a little. However, it was kind of frustrating to read that in the first book because they just act like it's completely fine and normal. But in this one, they actually do mention that apparently by having a sexual relationship, they were breaking rules. Like, student-teacher relationships are forbidden at Zodiac Academy, and if it gets found out, then he will be fired. And that genuinely shocked me, because I was like, wow, that actually makes sense. That is a thing that occurs in the real world, and I am shocked that the authors actually took time out of their assuredly very busy schedules to write a couple of lines about that. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure it was only put in so that they could make the romance more spicy and tense. You know, it's so that the readers can go like, OMG, it's forbidden love, or something like that.
Disappointed!
There's not a real exploration of how this is a weird relationship or how it could lead to problems for them down the line. But again, like, there's effort to put in some conflict here. Like, they're trying. And Tory Darcy do have a bit more to them than simply being the main characters now. Like, again, they're the exact same person, but that exact same person does have a little bit to her or them. Man, I'm confusing myself with this now. So their dad was king of the Fae before they were born. However, they will only inherit the throne if they're worthy, and there are a lot of other candidates for the throne. Now, I'm not sure exactly how this is supposed to work. I think the books are saying that this is an elected monarchy of some sort, which is fine. I think that's actually a bit more interesting than it just being a straight-up hereditary monarchy. But that also raises a lot of questions about how this government works and how the election system works and who is eligible to vote. Like, who's eligible for the throne, too. Presumably nobility, but, like, are all of the nobility allowed to put their name in the running to become king or queen? Or can only some of them do it? Remember when Vampire Academy had a very similar plotline to this? That was handled better. And I don't think that was handled great in those books. But at least there, we, the audience, understood how and why things worked so that we could theorize about what might happen and we could hope for a good outcome. We can't really do that here because all we know really is that Tory Darcy's dad was the previous king of Solaria, and now he's dead, and now other people want to be king or queen, and how exactly does this work? We're not sure. But some of the candidates do see Tory Darcy as a threat to their ambitions. However, Tory Darcy don't really care. Like, they don't want the throne. They just want to finish school so that they can inherit their money and then go home, which, like, yeah, that is personality. That is like a character choice, and it's a character choice that makes sense given what they're like and what they've been through. Like, they don't know the Fae realm. They don't really want to be a part of it. They don't like it here that much. They just want to get their money so they're no longer poor and then go home. That actually makes sense, and it is an actual character trait. Like, damn, okay. And their dad was known as the Savage King, and he was, like, really bad, I guess. Yeah, the characters never specify how he was bad or why he was bad, really. I assume he was some sort of nasty tyrant, but I mean, you can't just say he was a nasty tyrant and leave it at that and expect the audience to really give a shit, you know? It would hit home if we had some tales of his evil deeds, you know? If there was a character who said something like, "Your dad massacred my entire town, I was the only survivor," or something like that, then yeah, that would be more interesting, and then we would get the idea that, oh yeah, okay, he really was a savage king. This guy sucked. That would also give you an opportunity to explore Tory Darcy's relationship to their unknown family and have them reckon with that legacy. Like, they have this massive inheritance waiting for them, and that's great, but their inheritance is blood money. That would be kind of cool to explore, but this book doesn't even mention it, which makes me feel like the sequels are not going to go into it in any real depth or in any real intelligent way either. That said, I do sympathize with Tory Darcy, because I understand what it's like to come from an awful bloodline. There's an entire town in Louisiana named after my family. That is a true story, actually. It's a town of like 300 people in the middle of nowhere in northern Louisiana, so I think you already know what a shithole it is.
No, I don't know what I expected.
You know, speaking of family legacy, one of the love interests in this book is named Max. At least, I think it's Max. I mean, the same way Tory and Darcy merge together, all of the love interests kind of blend together. So I could straight up be referring to this guy by the wrong name and getting him mixed up with someone else. But Max, he has a sad backstory. He's a dragon fae, so he can transform into a dragon. And he comes from a noble family that can all transform into dragons. But he, again, has a sad backstory because his dad was in love with one woman and he was forced to marry another, and then he continued carrying on an affair with the original woman, and that was Max's mother. So he has an evil stepmother and he's a bastard, and his stepmom is trying to cut him out of his inheritance. It's kind of like Catelyn Stark and Jon Snow, except in addition to Catelyn Stark being kind of a terrible person to a child who did nothing wrong, she also has no other redeeming qualities to make her an interesting character. Max is pretending to be a pure-blooded dragon fae, but he's not a pureblood because his grandfather on his mother's side was a minotaur. So he's carrying minotaur genes, and that's like bad or something. I'm not sure how that's supposed to work. And he's also an asshole all the time, just like the other love interests in these books. And look, the backstory, it's an explanation for his behavior, but it's not an excuse. He's still an asshole. And I think that's why most bad boy love interests in romance novels really, really fail. Because most authors don't seem to know the difference between an explanation and an excuse for your behavior. Like, you can say your stepmom was mean, or you have a mental illness or something, and that can excuse some of your actions up to a point, but after a while, you really do gotta take responsibility. Like, when I was a kid, one of my friend's mom was bipolar, right? Like, she was actually diagnosed as being bipolar, and in a manic episode, she cheated on her husband. And that's a bad thing that she did. Like, yeah, her illness kinda, sorta made her do it. Actually, no, I'm not gonna say her illness made her do it, but her illness was part of why she did it, but she still did it, you know? And ultimately, that's the problem with not just Max in Ruthless Fae, but a lot of bad boy love interests across multiple different genres that I've read, but mostly in novels largely focused on romance. What I'm getting at here is that Max is not a deep character. He's not a complex character. He's not an interesting character. He's not even really a likable character. But he is a character. Like, he's actually playing in the pitball game near the end of the book, and we see things from his POV a little bit, and he's desperately trying to impress his dad, who is sitting in the audience, and I felt bad for him. Like, I sympathized with him, and I wanted him to play well so that his dad would be proud of him. And just by virtue of having a single moment like that where I felt anything for any of the characters, this book is 10 times better than the first one. Like, I don't know, while I still don't like this book, I have to give credit where it's due. The setting here is still awful. Like, it's still just Harry Potter, but with even less thought put into it. That said, there is some effort to put in some new details here. Like, pitball exists. You know, it's a big sport that a lot of people play or are fans of, and it has rules, which the book actually explains to us. There are fans who, you know, have chants and stuff when they're at games. The game also involves magic, so we see some of this world's magic system, which is very, very simplistic, but shit, at least they're doing it and using it for something. And there is strategy to how they play. And okay, like, yeah, again, I don't care that much about pitball, but at least there's some effort here to incorporate it into the rest of the world. There's a detail about how the Fae have multiple portals to the human world where they go through and they just buy stuff from human companies, like cars and electronics, you know, complicated machinery that they either are unable to make themselves or they just don't feel like it. And it's mentioned that the Fae also use their hypnosis magic to get stuff very, very cheaply. And it does make sense that they would do that, but the book also points out that that's a very shitty thing to do, and that they're taking advantage of people. Like, yeah, okay, I'm glad somebody said it. And just small detail, they change the names of the brands and stuff because they don't want to use human names for their stuff. So, like, there's a car called a Ferrari, which, again, that made me chuckle. Like, the funny stuff in this book is, for the most part, intentionally funny. The world building here is still bad, but shit, dude, it feels like the authors were trying, and I have to give credit for that. The one area where it doesn't feel like they were trying were with characters' names. All the Fae have names like Max and Darius and Caleb. Like, these don't feel like otherworldly Fae. These feel like teenagers with fucking broccoli hair. Am I old enough to make fun of teenagers, or I don't know how this works. And most of the world still feels like Earth. You know, Zodiac Academy itself doesn't feel like an old mystical place the way Hogwarts did. All of the towns are just regular towns with cars and bars and dudes named Caleb and Max running around. Like, it doesn't feel like a Fae realm, is what I'm saying. It doesn't feel like a whimsical, magical place where you can go on adventures, which was the appeal of Harry Potter. You know, this feels like a regular college story, or a regular story set in a college, except all the characters largely act like middle schoolers, and occasionally magic pops up. The fact that they're Fae barely seems to affect anything. And speaking of which, like I keep saying, every type of Fae, or every type of magical creature is just a type of Fae. The Fae exist in different orders, and when you get old enough, you find out which order you're a member of, and then you can just transform into that creature. So creatures like dragons, minotaurs, werewolves, pegasi, you know, they're just Fae. And the Fae themselves are normally just exactly like humans in every way, except they have magic that they occasionally use. And once they unlock their order, they can transform. And Tori Darcy doesn't know her order yet, and that's like a big deal. You know, we're 2 books in and they still don't know what they're supposed to be. But you can't really build that up and try to get the audience hyped when we know it's going to be something cool and beautiful and possibly unprecedented, you know? It's going to be one of the cool magical creatures that they can turn into. They're going to be dragons, or griffins, or vampires, or angels, you know, one of the cool ones. Because there's no way a book series like this would ever have the protagonists be something that isn't cool, powerful, and sexy. But no matter their power, and no matter all the cool spells they can do or whatever, they will always need men to do everything for them. Don't get mad at me for pointing that out. That's how these authors always will write these books. even if the authors are women. Get mad at them. Don't get mad at me for noticing the pattern. Anyways, the point I'm getting at is that by folding all of these magical creatures into just being fae, the world becomes a lot smaller. Like, there isn't a different culture or society for these different races, and none of them are like wild animals that they have to fear running into out in the forest or anything. They're all just the same. You know, they all go to school together, and they mix together as friends or as lovers. And I mean, their order is still kind of like their clan or their tribe or something, but they don't have parallel societies. You know, it's not like if you are a werewolf, you have to go live with the werewolf order and they have like their own town and they barely interact with the rest of the world or anything like that. They're all still mixed together. So it seems more like a bunch of social clubs than anything. So the audience isn't going to sit here and wonder what werewolves are like or what dragons do in their spare time or anything like that. They're all just fae. And fae are just humans who have magic. We also don't know how many orders there are or what the hierarchy for them is, because there is some sort of ranked hierarchy for the fae orders, but we don't know what it is. Some of them are just better than others. Like dragons are one of the super high cool fae orders, and minotaurs are not. And I don't know exactly how or why that works, but it is integral to Max's backstory, so I guess I care about it. And this all makes me wonder even more what the nymphs are and how they're different than the fae. Because if all these fantasy creatures were different species, I honestly wouldn't question one of them being at odds with the fae. But now that I know they're all the same, except for these guys, now I'm just weirded out and confused. Where did the fae and the nymphs come from? How and why is their magic different? Why do the fae transform and seemingly the nymphs don't? And most importantly of all, why are they fighting? The sequels could, theoretically, answer these questions, but we both know they're probably not going to. I'm sorry, this is not a great thing to just be casually holding and gesturing with. It is surprisingly heavy.
So go back to the club.
The nymphs are probably just going to be evil. Like, they just go to war with the fae because that's what they do. And maybe there will be some sort of half-assed explanation about how the fae are bad sometimes too, but it's not going to be very interesting or in-depth. And the point I'm getting at is that the war that apparently started at the end of this book is not going to make much sense. Because wars are politics by other means, and when bad writers try to depict them, they just sort of happen for no reason. I will take a moment to say that the way the fae replenish their magic is pretty neat though, because the way they do it is different for each order. Vampires have to feed on others to replenish their magic. Werewolves run under the full moon. Dragons hoard gold. And this does affect the way that they act. And it's kind of rare to see something like that in fantasy. You know, most of the time it's just like they get tired, but then they rest for a while and they're back where they were. Whereas with the fae in these books, it's not that simple. And shit, I gotta give credit where it's due. That's something original that I haven't seen a whole lot. And the different ways of restoring their magic does affect how they act. You know, there's one of the pitball players is a werewolf. So he's the only one on the team that is not able to replenish his magic during the break at halftime. So whenever he plays, he goes really easy in the first half, and then he goes all out in the second half when everyone else is a bit more exhausted. So, like I said earlier, pitball does have actual strategy to it. So it's kind of neat and interesting that the books actually leaned into that a little bit. And this is all affected by the world that the story takes place in. Like, look, it's neat that magic works differently for different groups of people. That's all I'm saying. The one part of this book where there has been no improvement and seemingly no effort towards improvement is the prose and the dialogue. Like, just the actual way it's written is not any better than it was in the first book, and the first book wasn't very good about that. Like, there's not much detail given to the scenery or the descriptions or the actions, which is a bit of a problem for a book that is largely written around the sex scenes. You know, what do people look like? I don't know, they're all just hot. The men are all super tall and muscular. They're all equally super tall and muscular, so none of them even stands out from the crowd. And the women are just sexy. We don't need to know how they're sexy, they're just sexy. Because they're sexy, but they look exactly like you. the woman in her 20s who is reading this book.
Why you boring me? I'm right.
So there's not a lot of specifics to help you get into the mood or to help set the scene or anything, but also that does make the book go by a lot quicker. Like, neither of these books are particularly long, which I do appreciate. I'll give them a point for that. But like, this is a problem for the sex scenes, and it's a problem for the action scenes, which the only real action scene in this book is the final battle, and the final battle is a mess. It's basically just a succession of, he threw a fireball, she jumped over here and kicked this guy, he picked up a chair and threw it at him. It's not very well written. Like, there's no sense of stakes or where everyone is or even what's happening beyond a vague sense of people fighting. And there's definitely no sense of fear or desperation or panic or anything like that. It's just, he did this, she did that, she did that. And I didn't care about what was going on. I just didn't. There are more POV characters than just Tori and Darcy in this one, but they all have the exact same voice and cadence. Like, there's no different word choice or sentence structure. None of them focus on different things than others. Like, look, a bit of advice for any aspiring writers out there: if you're trying to do a book with multiple first-person POVs, have one character describe stuff in detail, and have another one who is very sparse with descriptions. Just a fucking idea. You know, do something to allow the audience to tell them apart, so you don't have to constantly keep reminding them, this is this person, this is this person. Like, fucking the Onision trilogy did this better than the vast majority of Romantasy authors do. Like, the Onision trilogy, as bad as it is, it did have the characters' personalities come across in their narration. But the fact that all of their narration is exactly the same is the main reason why I can't tell Tori and Darcy apart, so they're just Tori Darcy to me. And the dialogue is also bad, but in a different way. I guess I would say it's way too direct. You know, all of their emotions and thoughts are just kind of stated outright. You know, no one ever lies, no one ever omits information. Like, Max, the dude with the evil stepmom, just kind of explains his whole backstory to Tori Darcy. Like, he doesn't give them a few details to start off with, and then later, once he's gotten to know them better, go into the more personal stuff. He just says everything right up front. And every conversation in the book is exactly like that. It has characters that just come right out and say, I am very upset right now, or I am horny for you, but I also dislike you on a personal level, and that is leading to conflicting emotions within my mind, or I am elated by the progress I've made in controlling my magic. You know, everything is just right there. There's no subtext, there's no thought required to understand these characters, such as they are. There's not a lot there to understand, but still, like, you should have to think a little bit. You should have to read between the lines with these sorts of things. The dialogue isn't the worst I've ever read, but there's no improvement at all, and that's kind of disappointing in a book that, while, again, I just want to keep emphasizing, it's bad, but it is an improvement over the first book. So, Ruthless Fae, Book 2 of the Zodiac Academy series, is better than Book 1. And if it continues at this rate, it could be thoroughly mediocre by Book 3. It might even be subpar by Book 4. By the time we reach Book 5, it might even be below average. And then it could... Okay, wait. There's 12. There are 12 of these fucking books. Alright, I seriously doubt I'm ever gonna read the whole series, but, like, you people better watch these videos. Like, if you continue watching these videos, then that will encourage me to possibly keep reading more of this series. But that's all I have to say for now. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Check out my merch store. Perhaps become a YouTube channel member or Patreon patron. Goodbye. Hello to everyone, especially hello to the people who watched the entire video up until this point. You're awesome. These names you see on screen here, these are my patrons. I want to give a special shout out to my $10 and up patrons: 3 Cat Day, Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Brother Santodes, Carolina Clay, Chaotic Entity 1, Chris Goldap, Lexi Delorme, Lord Tiebreaker, Michael and Katie Hake, Mr. A5013, Proscriptions of Dwojang, PsychXS, Toa Michael, Vey Victus, and Wesley. I could not do this without you guys. You being here really does mean the world to me. If you want to get your name on here, consider donating to my Patreon. It starts at just $1 a month. You can also become a YouTube channel member, or check out my merchandise store, or go over on Cameo and buy a shout out from me. Or if you don't feel like doing any of that, you can always just rate the video and comment on it and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Did you know I have a second channel which I haven't uploaded to in a while? Because I have one of those too. Anyways, yeah, see ya. Goodbye. There's no way to say goodbye here that doesn't sound awkward, but goodbye.